I run not because I have to, but because I want to. I run in order to test myself, in order to challenge myself, in order to truly find out who I am and what I am made of. Running is my meditation, my medication, and my escape. Running is my constant. Running is my passion. Running is my platform. Running is who I am and who I will continue to be. Running has rescued me. For that, I am forever grateful. And with that being read, I want to welcome you back to the 127 Fit Podcast. Today's guest is an ultra runner, mountain addict, business owner, and crazy, wild man. Today's guest is Joshua Miller. Joshua, I want to welcome you to the 127 Fit Podcast.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I wanted to be here so bad. I actually got a speeding ticket on the way down here this morning.
Dude, are you serious?
I completely forgot to tell you. It was on. Let's see, what's before? Yeah, it was on 25 right when I got there, and a cop was sitting on the side with his radar, and it was like a 55 mile an hour like short area, and he just pulled me right over, and I was going quite a bit over. So
now, was this within Colorado Springs city limits?
No. This was in Denver this morning.
Okay. That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. First speeding ticket in like 8 years, I think. Yeah.
Dude, I was. That reminds me. I think it was I was up in Boulder here like 2 weeks ago, but actually when I interviewed Eric Hinman for the podcast, I got done with the podcast with him, and I was in Boulder. They have the, which you know because that's where you live, they have at the stoplights, they have the cameras. So if you run a red light or whatever, they snap a picture of your license plate, they send you the nice ticket in the mail with the picture of you behind your driving wheel.
Going like
everything, yeah, dude. So 2 times ago when I was up in Boulder to do a podcast interview with Eric, I'm going through a yellow light, but it snapped me, dude. I get snapped, and I was like, dude, no. I was like, it was yellow, man. But, so then, like, I don't know, 3 weeks later, I got the ticket in the mail. And dude, it had a picture of my license plate. It had a picture of me with my earbuds in because I always listen to podcasts when I'm driving. And I was like, focused on the road ahead and everything. I was like, dude, that's kind of crazy and eerie. And then I had to pay like, I don't know, $75. But, and that's the first ticket I've had in a long time, and it's good because it says on there it's not going to go on your record or anything like that.
Yeah,
so I'm like, okay, I can handle $75. But so then the next time I went up to Boulder, dude, I was like driving like a grandpa. I was like, I'm like, okay, dude, like I'm going to stop. I'm not going to go through any yellow lights. I'm going to, so.
That's what I did.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, that's what I did the whole way rest up here. If somebody passed me, I'd be like, oh, they need to slow down. I started judging every person.
That's how it is, man. Cool. Well, that's a great way to kick off the podcast, man. Talking about our recent tickets. So let's get into a little bit, just kind of a warm up here, Joshua. I want to just ask you, do you have a favorite quote or mantra? Maybe there's a quote from the past that played a big role in your life, or a mantra, and then maybe there's one currently, or maybe there's just one kind of overall for your life in general that you like to hold on to. Is there a favorite quote or mantra that you have?
Yeah. I mean, so the one that I do have is not like super interesting or super, mind blowing. But one that's always stuck with me is Winston Churchill's quote, just never, never, never give up. And there's variations of that. But it sounds so simple, and it is very simple, but in some of the hardest times that you go through, you can think about that quote and almost get, mad at that quote because you're like, oh man, I want to give up. But that's something that I always remember, no matter what I'm doing, no matter if I'm working or if I'm running. I just, say that quote over and over again. Sometimes it's never, 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 never give up, or sometimes it's just never give up. But that's one quote that I always have in my head.
Awesome. Very cool. Now, I know that you have been a guest on some other podcasts outside of this one. Are you a regular podcast listener? And if so, do you have kind of a go-to podcast that you really enjoy?
Yeah. So I actually didn't listen to podcasts before I started being on them. But one I like, we were talking about this a minute ago. I like Joe Rogan a lot. Not really so much because of him. I mean, he is a super interesting guy, but he just has really interesting people on his podcast, so I like him. There's also a podcast called Radio Lab that I like to listen to. It has a lot of like weird topics about like, you know, plants and, you know, all these crazy scientific aspects of things. And then I like a podcast called Trail Runner Nation, which has a lot of elite professional trail runners on it. And those are about probably the three that I listen to. I do need to get more into them because there's like hundreds or thousands of them out there. So.
Dude, I mean, that's where, for me, having a bachelor's degree in exercise science and being a teacher and being a fitness junkie, like, literally that's where I get my continued education from is through podcasts. Because literally, dude, through podcasts, you can have access to the most world-renowned leaders in fitness and health and, you know, any genre, any niche. Like, dude, all of these people, or most of these, you know, high-performing people get on a podcast or two, and you can really just learn, man.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I mean, instead of going to college for 4 years and spending thousands of dollars, dude, you can listen to a podcast for free or whatever, and have a professor or have some guru sharing the information that you would spend thousands of dollars to sit in a class or go to, you know, some sort of seminar or whatever. I mean, it's amazing, dude. It really is. And Trail Runner Nation podcast is a great one. I've listened to that several times, and that's a great one. Now, going back to Joe Rogan, Joe Rogan, I've listened to some of his podcasts because of the guests that he has, not necessarily for him, because his podcasts are way too long for me. Yeah. But they also just, he goes off on some woo-woo, wacky, crazy tangents, and I'm like, dude, I can't handle all this. But his podcast is obviously one of the best ones in the world, and like always ranked in like top 5, top 10. Yeah. And he has a great personality, is a great interviewer. But is there a specific maybe guest that Joe has had on that you've really enjoyed?
Yeah. Oh man, I mean, I knew you were gonna ask that, and there's like 5 that I have. I'd say probably. All right, and this is gonna sound crazy when I first say it because I don't necessarily agree with the guy, but Ted Nugent was on there probably a year ago, right. And he's just like this super eccentric, like crazy dude. And he talks about bow hunting and stuff, and like from listening to him, like I got interested in bow hunting, just because how like deeply he understood like the spiritual side of like killing another animal. Right. And yeah, so he's probably my favorite. And then I like Elon Musk a lot just because it was a really like super chill, relaxed interview. But yeah, probably Ted Nugent and Elon Musk. Probably. Cool.
Now, have you? I'm sure you have. Have you heard of David Goggins?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, because I know he was on there. So.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure that was probably one that you enjoyed because he's.
Super
I was talking to Joshua Stevens on our podcast up in Boulder a couple weeks ago when I interviewed him. I think David Goggins came up during our conversation, and like I tell people, it's like if you listen to 2 minutes of David Goggins speak, I mean, if you can get past, you know, all of the language and the intensity and just really listen to him like on a human level, that man is on a different human level. Man. Like I'm like, dude, he's like, you can learn so much about just life and struggle and hardship and overcoming and just nutting it up and just getting stuff done. Like I could listen to him all day long, man, because he's literally on a different human level, and it's through experience. Mm-hmm. It's not through like book knowledge or some, you know, mystic whatever. It's like, no, dude, this is the life I've lived, and I'm just telling you about it. And that's why he gets so passionate and so intense, man, because he's like, he's still living it, dude. Like it's insane. I mean, the dude is on another human level, and I love it. And so when you said Joe Rogan, and I know, you know, you're obviously an ultra runner, David Goggins is an ultra runner, so I was thinking maybe he might have been one that you really enjoyed as well on that podcast. So.
Yeah, and I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, all you have to do is get on Facebook or Instagram if you're not feeling like going on a run and just read one of David's posts. And I like the story behind like how he first started running. Like how he weighed like 240 pounds. He was this huge dude, and just running that first 100 miles around that track. And like, I actually did a race that he ran so he used to live in Alabama, I think, and I used to live in Tennessee. and I did a race called Music City Ultra there, and he raced it as well.
Okay, cool.
And I was in like 5th place because I knew he was gonna win, and I was like, man, I want to get as close to him as I can so I can see him. And I ended up, pushing hard, but I believe I got 3rd place. And 2nd place said that when David finished, he didn't even stop to grab a trophy or anything. He just left. So he just crossed the finish line, got in his car, and just left. And just left his trophy
awesome.
and left. And I was like, that's totally David Goggins.
Yeah. And I think it was him too. I heard that he'll run to the race, like if he's running a 50K or a 50 miler or even a 100 miler, the dude will run to the start line, and then he'll run the 100 miles, and then he'll just like run back home. Just a different level, man. And that's, you just gotta, we're all made differently, we're all wired differently, and David Goggins is but as he said, I don't even want to say that he's wired differently. I think he's just really tapped into his mental and physical potential, and he's willing to take his mind and his body where most of us aren't willing, so he's a great motivation. So all right, cool, man. So we got the favorite quote, the Winston Churchill, never ever 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 give up. Touch on some of your most listened to and favorite podcasts, which is really, really cool. So let's transition into a little bit of do you have like a specific morning routine, Joshua, that you typically try to stick to, let's say on a normal day in Boulder where you currently live?
Oh man, this is horrible. I'm actually trying to get better at that. I do work from home.
Okay.
So since I'm home all day, I try and make my day different each day, or I'll get crazy about it. But I am trying to make my mornings more regime. Last year, I would wake up and do a sunrise run probably 3 or 4 days out of the week.
Cool.
But this year, since I did transition to working from home, I don't really have a routine. But that kind of aligns with kind of the person I am.
Exactly.
I like to live in the moment a lot, and I plan for my life, but I kind of just, all right, I'm going to wake up at this time, and I might run now, I might run later.
Yep.
It is nice to have a routine, so I do have like little things here and there, but as far as my mornings and stuff go, I could wake up for a sunrise run, or I could sleep until 9 a.m.
Cool.
It just all depends on what the weather is and what my training schedule is.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Now, just as you're talking and just sharing a little bit, it definitely seems like to me that you are a very, 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 very free-spirited individual. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
cool.
For sure.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. I'm sure we'll touch on this, but I've been like that ever since I was like 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into that now, since we're kind of moving in that direction. We kind of got the warm up done. Let's dive into your backstory. Let's talk about kind of where you grew up, and just as much as you want to share. We don't have to get crazy into any detail, but let's just talk about a little bit of your upbringing, where you grew up, family life, brothers, sisters. Were you involved in athletics as a kid? And then we'll just continue to kind of transition and move along your story and your life journey, Joshua.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was born in Washington, D.C. On October 5th, which I found out is the most common birthday in the world, which is pretty
cool.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
So I was born there. I had a very typical childhood. My dad was a firefighter, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. I have a brother as well, who's 3 years younger than me, named Matt, and me and him are the complete opposite. So we would just fight like all day, and like I don't know how my mom didn't go completely crazy. But yeah, I definitely was that kid that was outside all day, every day, like just outside, like riding my bike, like making mud mounds, like building a fort. I'm like doing everything that I could. Picking up snakes, doing all that kind of stuff. I was always an outside kid. I've really never ever played video games. I know a lot of guys play a lot of video games. Even at our age, they play. But I've just never had. I've always wanted to be moving. Go. Let's do this, let's do that. And like that's why I think I drove my mom crazy. So I could never sit down and actually play a video game. And going throughout school, that showed in sports too, because I would start a sport and then I would quit and go to another sport.
Okay.
So I would play soccer, and then, I don't like that, and then go to basketball, then go to football, then go to wrestling, then go to tennis. I played pretty much every sport there is in school. Yeah, as far as sports, I played soccer for, since from I was 6 until I was about 15, and that was just because a lot of my friends did it, so it was like a social thing. Got to high school, and during this whole time, I like never ran or did anything like that. So got to high school, started to do wrestling. It was all right, I got kind of bored of it after a while, like a lot of things. So then I tried tennis, and then to stay in shape during off season, I actually would do cross country on the off season for tennis, and I actually would run cross country meets in Converse high tops for some weird reason. I don't.
That's hardcore.
Yeah. I don't know why I did that, but I think the first day I wore them because I forgot shoes, and I just was known for that, so I just started doing it. So that's kind of the first time I got a taste for running. Honestly, I didn't like fall in love with it then. But actually after high school and into college, I'm not sure if we wanted to get into the addiction part right now or not, or
let's keep moving in the direction of your childhood, and then we'll get to that, because that's a big part of
gotcha.
I think, for you for sure.
Gotcha. Cool. So then throughout high school, I did wrestling and actually got into bodybuilding for a while. So I went from like 170 up to like 220 when I was in high school.
Wow.
And then I would cut back down for tennis. So it was a bunch of like just random stuff like here and there. I'm like doing a bunch of crazy stuff. And that was my childhood. Pretty normal life, except for I wasn't like a sports star or anything. I just did a bunch of different things.
Now, did you? Because you're touching on it, and just the energy I'm getting from you right now during the podcast is like you are a high energy guy and just moving around a lot and things of that nature. Did you get in a lot of trouble then in school because of your being high energy and just kind of like, not maybe being able to sit still, or were you able to kind of like contain that energy when you were supposed to and sit behind the desk and do your homework? What was that kind of like for you?
Yeah, and I actually get asked that a lot too. But I actually didn't really get in trouble at all in school. It was more of more along the lines of like mischievous kind of things, there's Josh, he's doing that kind of crazy stuff, or there's Josh, he played a trick on me or something. But I never actually got detention or ISS or anything, because when I was in school, I grew up in the South, and like there you respect people and you respect your teachers and everything. So I grew up calling my teachers like ma'am and sir. So when I was in school and they're at there to work, I was there to work. And two, I actually liked going to school. I liked math a lot for some reason. Not for some reason. Math is cool, but so I was good with homework. High school, I got probably like a B average. I wasn't like this like A student, but I definitely liked going to school and
you took care of your business. I graduated high school and college with 3 2s, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
It's not definitely not a 4.0, but that's a B average. I'll take that all day. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So let's. I appreciate you sharing a little bit about your upbringing, because I am a firm believer that we're all still to this day, until the day we die, on some level products of our home environment. We're products of the community or the town or the city that we grew up in. We're products of the adults that were in our lives, the teachers, the coaches. On some level, until the day we die, we are products of all of that through our childhood and our upbringing. So I thank you for sharing that, Joshua. Now let's move on, because you mentioned it a little bit, and this is a big part of your story. This is a big part of, I think, those who are going to listen to this podcast. It's going to be a big part of what they're going to take away, and maybe somebody out there or a few people out there are going to be able to relate to this part of your story, and that's the addiction, and that's the drugs that came into your life. So let's, if you don't mind sharing, which I know you don't, that's a big reason why I think you reached out to me, is to be able to share a little bit of your story, and specifically this part, just to positively impact people that might be listening. So why don't you start talking about the drug use and kind of when that happened, when that all started, and just the genesis of that. And then I know from listening to another podcast of yours, Joshua, I mean, it went on for several years. So let's just move along with the addiction and the drugs, how that affected you, and post high school and college and into your 20s.
Yeah. I mean, so that kind of started in high school. I definitely was somebody who had like a bunch of different friends. So I was friends with, the football jocks. I was friends with like the quote unquote nerds. I was, friends with the theater people. And one of those groups of friends were kind of like the Nirvana listening kind of group, which kind of was like me too. And they started, smoking weed and stuff. And of course I started that, and I never really liked it. But actually throughout like high school and college, like when I did drugs, it was primarily just me alone. I didn't like being around people, and that was one warning sign that that would become a problem, because most people just do it socially when they're around people, but I liked doing it away from people, and just staying to myself. And I think why, I've always thought like, why did I do all that stuff, and why did I use all those drugs? It's, there's people that have been through trauma and that have been through horrible things, and they use the drugs to numb it. Why am I like some person I use it? And I think it just comes down to like that whole high energy aspect. I always wanted things to be like, like skydiving, like jumping, bull riding, doing all that crazy stuff. And, that's not how life is. Sometimes life is really mundane and boring. And for some reason, I wouldn't accept that. And I don't know why, but so I use drugs as a way to just heighten up the mood and, just hype up everything. And throughout high school, I dabbled in a couple things, but, I didn't really get into it as much. Once I got to college, the first year I did amazing. I had like straight A's. It was perfect. And actually I hadn't drank until I got into college. So I started drinking a little bit. And when I would drink, I would, do other drugs. Yeah. And, that just kind of, they say it's a disease, and, not everybody, it's going to happen to them. But I can definitely tell that, because, like, once I started doing them, it's like that's all I would think about all the time. And, like, I would spend all my money on the drugs. I would, do whatever I had to get them. But, yeah, then the second year of college is when I started doing them heavily, like probably every day almost. And I was spending tons of money on all this stuff, just all the money that I got from working and all the money from my college fund, and I was just draining everything. And then of course, once you get to a point when you're using drugs, when you kind of turn into just using them into somebody who's more of an addict, is when you really start negatively affecting your life. And so for a whole semester, my sophomore year of college, I didn't go to class once, and my college fund was paying for that. I didn't go to class one time. Well, no, I did go one time, but I actually went to the wrong classroom, and one of my friends was in there, and he was like, "Why are you in here, man? This isn't your class." And I was like, "Yeah, wait, what am I doing in school in the first place?" So I kind of moved into this kind of like shady house. Ended up like just kind of holding myself in there and just using every single day. And I started DJing, which was even worse, because when you're doing all that and around drugs and alcohol, you start doing it more. But I ended up embarrassing myself more than not, because I would be so high that like I couldn't, play and play with a computer when you're, on a bunch of drugs. Right. But during this time, when I was about 21, was when I started getting involved in like heavier types of drugs. Like a bunch of like pills and, pretty much any drug that you can imagine. And at this time, I was using them all day. Sometimes I would stay up, 3 or 4 days at a time, and then sleep for 3 days. And at this point, I didn't think it was a problem, mainly just because I was naive and I didn't know what a drug addict was. Right. But of course, all my friends did, and all of them, left. There weren't any friends. I had one friend who's Larry, and I hope Larry's listening to this, but Larry saved my life multiple times. Larry was kind of like that best buddy that was around me, and I would not be here today if it wasn't for him. He would, make sure that if I was, nodding out on drugs or, fell asleep somewhere or at a bad house, he would come pick me up and take me home. So he definitely helped me out. But yeah, there probably when I was about 21, 22 is when I started using them, very heavily, and when I started stealing and stealing and lying and manipulating the people that are closest to me. I would always go to my parents' house and take money, and they found out, so they'd change the locks, and then when I found a way to get in, they'd put chairs up against the door. So I mean, I hurt the people that I loved the most.
Right.
And during this time, I went from like 230 because I was like bodybuilding, before that, down to like 140. So I just lost a ton of weight just because I wasn't eating. I wasn't taking care of myself. And I pretty much was at the lowest point in my life. And people, there's a lot of people that just gave up on me, that are just like, oh, he's just going to die. And do that. So I was just in a really bad spot. I ended up doing something really, really stupid one time, and which was, I had a girlfriend, and she had a whole closet of clothes, and she had a lot of money, and I took all of her clothes and sold them to like a consignment shop, like she wasn't gonna notice or something. Right. And she like called my mom, and my mom was like, and they were both like, man, we got to do something about this, because at this point she was just babysitting me, the girlfriend, so that I wouldn't, so that she could have her eyes on me, so that I wouldn't,
right.
Die or something.
And you sold all of her clothes when she was like on vacation,
yeah,
gone, so that you could score more drugs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I ended up not getting hardly any money at all. Got it. She came back. I lied to her. I said that I just sold the clothes so that I could pay her for rent because I was staying at her place. And then she found my phone and found out what I bought them for.
Right.
And then she called my family, and they were like, guys, man, oh my gosh, we have to do something about this. Like this isn't Josh. This is a crazy guy. This has been going on for probably about 3 or 4 years. So the first time I went to rehab was kind of not on my own accord. It was definitely because of other people. And for anybody who struggles with addiction, 99% of the time you're not going to stay sober if you're doing it for somebody else, because that is going to wear off after time. You're going to lose those relationships. You're going to, because it's a lot deeper than just doing it for somebody else. And went to rehab for the first time, kind of tricked the intake people into letting me just do outpatient. And that didn't work, because I started using almost right away, and then had to go into inpatient, and that went on for about a year and a half, probably 2 years, and I went into rehab about 3 times, I think, and then outpatient a couple times. And the last time I remember I went to rehab, it was when I had used when I was on outpatient, and they were like, nah, man, you got to go back into inpatient. And when I went to inpatient, they were like, well, Josh has already been here, multiple times, we need to think of something else. So there's this place called Stillwater, which is like this retreat for like 6 months. You're away from everything in the mountains, and you're gone. And I remember I was outside smoking a cigarette outside the rehab, and my mom just like slammed open the doors and ran out and put her hand up against a pole, and she was crying and like couldn't breathe, and like she didn't know I was standing there. And that's when I finally was like, oh my gosh, like I'm really, really hurting these people around me. And like I didn't see something like that, because she would hold herself up when she was around me.
Right.
And like that's the first time that I was just like, oh my gosh, I have to do something about this. So I was like, no, I don't need to go to Stillwater, which was stupid because I should have went to Stillwater still. Ended up just going back home with her, and then I just continued to use for probably about another year after that. Started drinking too. And I never liked drinking, but I told myself that since I was drinking, it wasn't bad because it wasn't drugs, but it's the same thing. Ended up getting a DUI when I was 2012, so probably about 6 years ago. And that was like the final straw for me when I quit drinking and quit doing everything, was because I was like, I could have killed somebody, because I'd actually gotten a wreck with somebody, and we hit head on, and when that happened, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm one of those people now that like could have killed somebody. Like this isn't just affecting me and my family.
Right.
I ended up having to go to jail for a little while. I had to pay a ton of money, but actually the DUI was kind of like out of 20 things that happened that got me to quit. The DUI was kind of like the, oh my gosh, I got to stop this. So that was back in 2012, and that's around the time that I stopped doing everything together.
Okay, so I just want to take a couple steps back, Joshua, just to paint the picture a little bit more. So how old were you when you actually started drugs? And what was it? Was it weed? You said you didn't start alcohol until you were in college. So was it weed? Was it something else? Just so somebody out there that's maybe can connecting with your story can maybe relate even on a deeper level. So what age did it all start? And then was this addiction to the drugs? Was this throughout all of your early 20s to the late 20s? Kind of just share a little bit about age-wise.
So the first time I did drugs was actually coke. It was actually cocaine, and I was 14, and it was out in the woods with a couple friends. And, being 14, you don't know anything about all that stuff. So I was just like, oh, my gosh. And so I did that, and then I actually didn't do it for, until I was about 15. And then I started smoking weed, kind of like how all the, not all the kids, how a lot of, people do in high school. But I never liked weed. Weed always didn't fare well with me, but I didn't know any other things to alter my mind, so I would just do it constantly. And then I got involved with a couple people when I was 17 or 18 who did a lot of ecstasy and a lot of uppers and and coke and amphetamine. So I got really into those, and going back to saying why I started using, to get hyped up and going, those were perfect for me, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. But the come down would just, you would feel like dying the next day, literally dying, like your brain was completely dead and that you just didn't want to go any longer. So after those come downs got pretty bad, I started doing a lot of pills, so a lot of Opanas, which are oxymorphone, which are a lot stronger than heroin, or any drugs like those. They're super expensive, but they did what I wanted them to do.
Yeah. Do you crush those pills up and then snort them so it gets into your system faster and all that?
Yeah. So I never got into shooting up drugs, which I'm so glad, because that would have been the death of me. I would be dead right now. Right. But yeah, I wouldn't take those unless I snorted them, because taking them orally didn't do much. So I would do that, and then I would normally speedball, which is where I would take an upper with it. So I would take an upper and a downer together, which John Belushi and a lot of people, that can stop your heart. And actually, when I got sober in rehab, I had to be on medical watch for a while because my heart would just have palpitations because I wouldn't know what to do. But yeah, throughout the 3.5, almost 4 years when I was doing heavy drugs every single day, it was definitely Opanas or Oxycontin, then when I had the money, I would do coke or mix it in. But I liked oxymorphone because it was the strongest that you could get of anything out there, and that's what I was looking for. So since I was 14 up until I started finding those, it was just this journey of finding the strongest drug. And honestly, man, the first time I did one of those, I felt like I'd been living my life with only one arm, and when I did that drug, it gave me the satisfaction of almost having two arms again, So imagine living with one arm and how empty that'd feel, and then once you do that drug, it makes you feel like you have two, and suddenly you're complete. And that's how it made me feel. It made me feel complete. It made me feel amazing, and that's when the money started. In rehab, we figured how much money I had spent on drugs, and I don't know how I got all this money, but I had spent over $150,000 over the course of 4 years on drugs. It was, and it was probably more than that, but I still don't know where I got that money because I obviously didn't have a job during that time, but it was from taking things or doing all those, stupid things.
Selling girlfriend's clothes and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy, man. So when you were in high school, though, the main drug that you used for the most part sounds like, I know you kind of mix some things in there every once in a while, but weed was kind of what you were able to get your hands on for the most part during high school, and then the harder stuff kind of came once you got out of high school and into college and got into some different crowds and the DJing and all that. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. I'd say like freshman, sophomore would be weed, and then later on I started doing like ecstasy and stuff like that. But yeah, I was just doing weed, just like you said, just as a way to like find something to change my mind.
Yeah. Now let's get back to kind of that awakening that you had when you got your DUI and crashed into somebody head on. How old were you at that time? And then let's dig a little bit more into kind of your mindset and that change of like, hey, I'm not only hurting myself and my immediate family, but I'm putting other people in danger. What was your mindset in that moment? How old were you? And then let's continue to take this journey on, Joshua.
Yeah, I mean, so that was 2012. So that was 6 years ago. So I was 23.
Okay.
And yeah, I'd actually quit doing drugs before that because like drugs and alcohol are a completely different thing. Like I knew I couldn't do drugs anymore or I would die. But I was like, oh, I'm fine with this whole alcohol thing. It's not going to cause any problems. And then one night, I drank way too much. I actually ended up getting in my car with just my boxers on and trying to drive to Nashville to meet somebody like downtown. Like I'm gonna get out my boxers or something.
I've got some of those stories myself, and it's alcohol, drugs, man. It
I know, man. It turns you into I always call it your dark passenger. Because you're driving, but there's a dark passenger sitting next to you telling you what to do. So I was in my boxers, ended up hitting that person. I got out of the car, and like I only know this because I called the person later on and found out, and from like the dash cam from the cop. But I guess I got out. I was like going crazy, like super ecstatic. And then the cop came and he put one handcuff on, and then I tried to run away from him, and like he was an awesome cop because he could have easily just slammed me on the ground, but he knew what was going on and he was just kind of trying to settle me down. Ended up going to jail, waking up, and that's the scariest feeling ever. I used to black out when I would drink, which is another sign of alcoholism. They say if you black out more than 3 times, then you're most likely an alcoholic, and I would black out almost every time I would drink. So, of course, during this whole time I was blacked out, but I woke up in a cell, and for anybody who's woken up in a cell before without knowing why you're there, like, that's the scariest thing ever, because you don't know if you killed somebody, you don't know if something happened, like, you have no idea. And then when I got fingerprinted, they were like, "Oh, you got in a car wreck for a DUI," and I was like, "Well, did the other person get hurt? Did the other person get hurt?"
Right.
And like she didn't know what was going on. So for like 3 or 4 days after that, I didn't know, what happened or all that. And that's the scariest thing ever because you don't know if you had killed somebody or hurt somebody, and that's it's crazy talking about it now, but yeah. So that was 2012, and at that point I figured out, like, all right, I know the drugs don't work, but like now I found out that alcohol is not really probably the best decision.
Right.
So yeah, I had to have one of those breathalyzers in my car for a year, and that definitely kept the feeling going of that I don't need to be drinking anymore. So kind of what got me to quit all that was, not being selfish anymore and realizing that what I'm doing isn't just affecting me, it's affecting all these other people. And, I had dreams, I had things I want to accomplish, and I've always been a very driven, dream, future-oriented type person. And during those years when I was using and drinking, that was just completely gone, and I was just focusing on survival of living now and getting the next hit and stuff. But yeah, so that's what finally got me to quit and move on, was for once not being selfish and kind of moving outside of myself and knowing that I could have hurt that person, that my parents are crying, that I'm stealing from these people. So that's kind of what finally got me to move on.
Okay, now did you just go cold turkey with the alcohol and all that, or was there a kind of a transition or process of like, hey, maybe a month where you didn't drink or do any drugs or anything, and then maybe you kind of relapsed, or what did that kind of look like, and how did you transition completely out of of drinking and leave all the drugs and kind of that whole chaos of life in your early 20s behind?
So when I quit drugs, it was definitely stop. I figured out I couldn't do, once a month or something, because I would turn into once a week and then once a day, and I tried that many times. So for anybody who is an addict, like, there is no middle ground. Like, you either keep using and put your life in that direction, or you got to stop completely. And I stopped cold turkey with that. Of course, I had to have some help in rehab, or it would have been just the worst experience. It was still the worst experience, but with the alcohol, I wasn't drinking every day. I was drinking 3 or 4 days a week, and then it did actually turn into every night. But I actually just quit that cold turkey, because people who have been doing that for 5 or 6 years, they might get seizures and die from that.
Yep.
But I actually hadn't been doing it long enough to get those. But I did have really bad effects, which I went to AA when I quit for about a year, and they definitely helped me with all that and gave me tips like, oh, you can take this supplement, or you can take this herb or this tea, it'll make you feel better. With alcohol, I did though try and I'm just gonna drink on the weekends, or I'm just gonna do that, and inevitably it just always went back to me drinking every single night, always, every single time. So after a while, I could play the tape for it in my head and know what's gonna happen, if I kept drinking. For drugs, I definitely quit completely, and then alcohol, I tried to keep it going, but after a while, I was like, I can't just do this on the weekends. So then I was just like, no more and no drinking.
Okay. So I want to move out of that part of your life, because there's so much more to your story than the addiction, although that is a huge part of your life. But before we move out of that part of your life, Joshua, is there maybe one lesson that you took from the drug years and the alcohol years that you continue to this day to apply to your life and kind of hold on to that lesson so that you never go back to that darkness and that pit?
So one thing I definitely learned is that when you're going through addiction or trauma or an eating disorder or anything like that, when you're in it, you think it's the most awful experience it is, and it is the most awful experience. But what I learned is that when you go through things like that, you're going to be stronger at the end. It's kind of like metal that's, been reinforced and been hammered, you're going to be stronger. And so that's one thing I definitely learned, is that if I go through something hard now in my life, I almost welcome it, because I know that it's going to pass. For second, just like you were saying, things are going to happen for a reason. And third is that I'm going to become stronger. So now when bad things happen, or not bad things, when shortcomings happen, I'm almost like, all right, let's bring this on. Same thing in an ultra. The longer and harder it is, I just know that I'm going to be stronger at the end. So definitely I learned strength through adversity is what I learned. Yeah.
Beautiful, man. Thank you. So let's get into Joshua Miller today. Mm-hmm. And you are an ultra runner, you're a mountain addict. Let's talk about when you transitioned out of the alcohol and the drugs, and you had the DUI, and you kind of just moved on from all of that. You kind of left that behind. Let's start talking about this genesis of running and ultra running and all of that coming to fruition in your life. And then how did you get to Colorado and Boulder? And let's just start unpacking who you are today and what you stand for and things of that nature, Joshua.
So when I quit, I actually went back to school and I graduated college. I actually did really well, because that was what I put all that focus I was putting on drugs, I put on school.
Right.
So I did really well, got a good internship at an advertising agency in Nashville, which I majored in advertising and marketing. Ended up doing well in the internship, and then they hired me on after that. Some of the people there knew that I struggled with alcohol and things of that matter. So one girl there actually was like, "Hey Josh, I'm running a half marathon, in 4 months. Do you want to do it with me?" And I was like, "What, running?" I had started bodybuilding again then, so I was like 230 pounds, like this huge dude. And I was like, Sure, why not? And it was actually the Nashville Women's Half Marathon. So I trained with 300 women every Saturday.
That's probably not that bad of a deal, is it?
It is. It's perfect. I had a few good experiences from there. No. So I was the only guy with like 200 women trainings. So it was awesome.
That's great, man.
It was road running too, which to this day I'm gonna say like props to all the road runners out there, man. Like I would much rather run a 100-mile ultra marathon on the trails than run a marathon on the road, man.
Right, yeah.
It is. But yeah,
it's boring, dude, isn't it? Like
it's so boring.
I ran my first half marathon this last summer, and it was back in my home state of Iowa, and I've shared this probably 100 times on the podcast, but dude, it was around this big loop around this lake. Dude, it was the most boring thing ever, man. I was like, dude, okay, like, yeah, I can run 13 miles or whatever without stopping, but dude, it's boring.
Yeah,
What's the point? So the trail thing,
Yeah.
I ran an Xterra 12K back in May at Cheyenne Mountain, and that was awesome, dude. There was deer, and so I can relate a little bit on the road as opposed to the trail. The trail and just being out in the nature outdoors is just so much more awesome, dude, when it comes to running. At least for me, and it sounds like for you too.
Trees. I mean, especially out here in Colorado.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, you could run like 50 miles and be just amazed the whole time.
For sure.
But yeah, so I somehow made it through that half marathon. Honestly, that's not when I fell in love with running. I still hated it after that. And, kept bodybuilding. And then she was like, hey, well, I'm going to run a trail half marathon. And I was like, all right, sure, why not? And I had the littlest crush on this girl, so I was like willing to do whatever.
There you go, man.
That
See
she wanted to
do. I was thinking there had to be something behind this girl and having a 230-pound bodybuilder getting into running, man.
Yeah.
So it always goes back to a girl, right?
Always. They have power and control.
There
power
you
and
go,
control.
man. There you go.
But I did the half. Thought it was pretty cool. I still weighed a whole lot, so it wasn't that fun. But then after that, she was like, hey, I'm going to run a 50K now. And I was like, how far is it 50K? And she was like, oh, it's like 31 miles. And I was like, dude, you're completely crazy.
Right.
She was like, oh, come on, just do it. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it.
She must have been really cute, man, or something, huh?
Yeah. And, so we started training, and then the third week into training, she quit. She was like, hey, guess what? I don't want to run the 50K anymore. And I was like, okay, but, I actually really like this thing. And, like, for the first time, like, my mindset changed from, trying to find, happiness and, a direction and, something to do with my life. It finally got focused onto something, and I was like, man, this is something, like, really awesome. Like, why do I like running out in the mountains so much? I mean, it's because when I go out there, I'm able to go inward, and a lot of people go out there to forget things, but me, when I start trail running, all the thoughts start flooding my head. But I kind of use the trail run as kind of like a purge to just get rid of all those thoughts and do them. But yeah, so I started doing that, ran the 50K, did okay, and then I started just running more. I did a 50-miler too, and this was back in like 2015, I think. 2015. Slowly started getting that weight off, which was a lot easier to run. Ended up just falling in love with it. I actually, put so much focus on it. And honestly, I got to admit, when I first started doing it, it was an outlet to let out a lot of anxiety and anger that I had from back when I used. I would just, in the beginning, I would just punish myself, just go out there and just torture myself, like go out there and run for like 3 hours in like 20-degree weather with just shorts on, just because I knew that it was just going to harden me. So I did that for the first couple years, but then after that, I started falling in love with it, and I was like, man, like I really love running. Like it makes me feel free. I have this freedom, I finally feel like I can, just breathe. Then just, quit my job, and pretty much just moved to Boulder, and because I'd visited a friend. I'm a friend in Boulder, and I was like, "This is the place to go, man." I'd gone to the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, and I was like, "Whoa, these mountains are cool." And then I went to Boulder, and I was like, "Whoa, these mountains are like totally cool." I did that. Just pretty much dropped everything and moved to Boulder. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. I had a little bit of savings, but only enough to last me like 2 months at the most. Moved here, and And you're talking about Josh, and like, man, the whole running community of Boulder is just amazing, like so amazing. And we were talking about Instagram too. It's like Instagram is like a catalyst for everybody to meet each other. A lot of people are cynical about it, and there is a cynical aspect of it, but the Boulder running community is just awesome, man. There's like so many characters and so many, there's like a 60-year-old man that's like an elite runner, and then there's, these fast people and these slower people and these medium people. So it's like everybody's just in there because they love what they do and they love running in the mountains.
Right.
And yeah, so I've met like tons and tons of people on Instagram, and go on adventures all the time out in the mountains. So that's pretty much what I've been doing the last. So I moved here in 2016 from Nashville.
Okay.
So I've been here for 2.5, almost 3 years. So that's what I've been doing. I've been racing, I've been running. My summers are just jam-packed with going to Moab, going down to the Great Sand Dunes, every weekend I try and, do a 14er or do something. That's why I was like, sure, man, I'll come down here because I've never done the incline,
Right.
So I wanted to get that in. But that's, it's kind of cool. It's like Colorado and ultra running have given me that release that I was seeking in drugs. It gives me the opportunity to be free, to, be wild and just be out there, kind of like an animal just running. And so that's why I love this place a whole bunch, is that I'm able to just run and be free, and I don't think about drugs anymore. Well, of course every once in a while I'll think about it, but like when I lived in Tennessee, I would just like every day it was like the hardest thing ever to not use, because your mind would just obsess on it. Now all I do is I go on a run if I'm having a bad day or if I'm thinking about something, and it just completely goes away. But for a while, I didn't want running to be a crutch for me to stay sober, so I actually took off about a year ago. I took off about 4 months just to prove to myself that I wasn't if I had gotten hurt and I couldn't run, that I would start using again. And actually taking those 4 months off was the coolest thing ever, because it actually helped me fall in love with it even more, because I'd been obsessed with a lot of things in my past, but there's a difference between love and obsession, and taking those 4 months off, and I tell this to anybody who's, struggling with, running or not having fun anymore, just take off 3 or 4 months or 2 months, and, you'll get the fun back, and you'll find out that you love it. Definitely Colorado and ultra running is definitely like the, well, I'm not going to say the finish line, because I guess life's a journey or whatever, but I'm definitely out of the bad parts of.
You've stepped out of the darkness and you've stepped into your light. It sounds like, you know what I mean? Like we've all gone. I've had very dark times in my life, and alcohol and just some really stupid stuff and wild and crazy and out of control, and it's this time of darkness, and I think most of us on some level need to experience some sort of darkness so that we can understand the greatness of the light, and be so thankful and grateful for the light, and just moving in a positive direction. And it really sounds like to me, Joshua, that it was pretty necessary for you to get away from where you grew up and some of those triggers in those areas, and just say, you know what, I'm the dark. Not saying where you lived is quote unquote darkness, but your own personal darkness, like leaving that darkness behind, leaving that chapter behind, and then beginning to write a whole new chapter, maybe a whole new book out in Boulder. I think from what I've understood of addiction and things like that, a lot of times people just need to completely get away from the environment that they experience that addiction in, and just go. And it sounds like Boulder and the community and ultra running specifically has kind of been that new chapter, that new book, and you stepping into the light in your own personal life. Is that fair to say? Or?
Yeah. Well, and two, they say in NA and AA that they have a saying, you can't change your playground and playmates, which means just because you move and get away from people doesn't mean that you're going to become sober. But I kind of have like a caveat to that, is that doing those things can allow you to breathe more, to be able to deal with the deeper things that you need to deal with. That definitely, getting away from all that definitely helped me just kind of take a breath of fresh air and really figure out what I wanted to do with my life and who I was. So those things really helped.
Beautiful. Now, when you're actually running, Joshua, what is your mindset? What is going through your mind? Because I know for me and some of my own personal struggles with anxiety and just I have a very active, busy mind. I'm always thinking. I'm always reflecting. There's just always a lot going on in my brain. And so I know when I personally run, there's a struggle for me, not physically, but just mentally. I just really go through a lot when I'm running, and it's very challenging for me. Again, not in the physical sense, but in the mental sense. So, but I've also heard, and especially people that are really heavily into the ultras and really have this passion, joy, and love for running. It's more of this. Maybe there's not a whole lot of thoughts going on, and you're able just to kind of, like you kind of said, just go with the flow and just kind of get lost in the joy and the endorphins of running. So, what is your mindset specifically when you're running, and how has that been a positive effect in your life?
So those definitely change depending on my mood, I guess. Definitely when I first started running, it was more of like a purge. I was out there to just murder myself and just push my body past my limit because that was the only way that I could get rid of the anxiety and the depression, was just to physically exhaust myself. And somebody told me a quote of it's some proverb where it's like, if you have this wild horse, you can run it and run it and run it and run it to calm it, or you can learn to be the trainer and control the horse instead. Right. And that really changed my mindset on running. But now currently it's the mindset. I mean, of course there are those days when I'm just really struggling and I'm having like physical anxiety where I'm just like almost shaking, and those runs I go out just to no matter what's on my training, I just go out there and just murder myself.
Right.
And then I'm completely calm after. But some days I might go out, and as soon as I start running, just thoughts just pour into my head and they won't stop, and I'm like, running is supposed to get rid of those thoughts, And I used to fight it and be like, no, have a calm mind when you're running. But now I just let what happens when I run happen. So if I feel anxious, I'm just going to deal with that. If I'm, if I'm thinking about a million things, I'm just going to let me think about a million things. Because after the run, always, like, regardless of why I run or how I feel, you're always going to feel better after. So like this morning, I was kind of like thinking about the ticket. I was like, man, how is that going to affect my insurance? How is it going to do this? Blah, blah, blah. But like as soon as I got done with the running, I was just like, I'll just pay the ticket and whatever happens. Yeah. So, I mean, most of the time when I go out, especially during training, so I'm training right now for a race at the end of April, and I love the training mindset because I'm very, like, focused and I'm very driven, and, like, when I'm training, I'm just like laser focused. Like, I trained for a race back in September called Sangre 100K, and since I work from home, I pretty much spent the whole month and a half to 2 months before not taking any work, driving down to the Sangres to run on the course, just completely, utterly, like, just everything I had in it. So that's kind of the mindset I'm in right now. The race is still 2 months out, so I'm kind of just like still getting into that mindset. There's probably about 5 or 6 different things that I feel when I run, but I always say whatever you feel, like, just like, don't fight it, because after you run, you're going to feel better regardless.
Cool, very cool. Now let's touch a little bit on, and you said a little bit about kind of getting that laser focus and hyper focus when you're kind of in that specific goal oriented training where you're moving towards a race or an event. But let's just talk on a general basis here for your training. Let's just talk about so the listeners can kind of understand what type of mileage are we talking about, Joshua, that you put in per week, just in a general sense.
Yeah. I mean, so I actually have a coach now who's named Brandon Yonk, Brandon Yonk Run Coach on Instagram. He's an awesome guy, awesome friend. He's definitely helped me get my mileage under control. Before, I would try and race without a coach, and I'd run like 120 miles a week.
Wow.
Yeah, which I mean, unless you're like an elite runner, like keeping that up for 2 or 3 weeks is going to really hurt your body.
Right.
So that really demolished me. It really put me in a bad spot in running. But now I'd say now that I got Brandon's brains behind it, right now I'm probably running about 60 miles a week.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit less. I'll probably peak at around 80, but it all depends on the distance. So the race I have, the end of April, is a 50K. So I probably not even peak more than 60. But I have a 100-miler in August, which I'll probably get up to the 80s or 90s.
Okay.
But it all depends on where I am in the training. So, you start off low mileage, and you go high, then you go low, then you go high, and then you peak. And it's this very, methodical process that I just trust my coach for.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's, that's something for me personally. Even when I did my first bodybuilding show, I hired a coach and stuff, because it allows you as the athlete basically to turn all of the nitty-gritty details over to somebody else and let them deal with that, so that you can solely focus on your training and getting the meals and the food that you need in and your recovery. And it's
Exactly.
just like one less thing that you have to deal with. And it sounds like you're a pretty type A personality. I'm a very type A personality. I think both of us have a lot of energy, and we're very focused and very driven and just dialed in. And when you can unload some of the stress of, let's say food prep or, training regimen and what you're going to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all that type of stuff. If you can just unload that to somebody else, and that's one less thing for individuals like you and me to have to think about and deal with, I think it's that much better. You know what I mean? It just really I think you've used the terminology while you've been talking and sharing your story today about just just freeing up your mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I know for me, and it sounds like for you as well, there's, with our type A personalities, with the high energy and the being ultra focused and stuff in life, there can be a lot of anxiety that can kind of come with that, and maybe some anxiousness, and if we can just unload and get rid of some of that and allow somebody else to speak into our lives and help us, that's just going to make us that much better of an athlete.
Exactly.
So that's cool, and I always go back to the fact that all the greatest athletes in the world, from Michael Jordan to the greatest Olympic runners or whatever, they all have coaches. You know what I mean? So it's like, who are we to think that we've got it all figured out?
Because we don't.
We don't need a coach. It's like, hey, if you can afford a coach, or maybe just afford a coach part-time, or just during the competing competition season, then I think it's definitely a positive to have somebody in your corner to help you out with the training and the nutrition and recovery. So
Exactly.
Let's talk. I want to talk about your nutrition. Is there a specific kind of nutrition category that you fall in? Are you a vegan, or is it paleo, or does it just kind of go back to kind of your free spirit and just kind of go with the flow, eat whatever? What does the nutrition kind of look like, Joshua?
Yeah. I mean, I'm super into experimenting, so I've tried being paleo for a year. I've tried being vegan, tried being vegetarian. So I've tried all these different aspects, and I found out that if I just eat a balanced meal, I'm good. So vegetables, like rice, oatmeal, chicken. I've tried fasting and stuff, and that doesn't work. So now my diet is just balanced meals. Chicken, rice, vegetables, oatmeal, sometimes pizza if I have a long run.
Yep.
After this, I have a long run, so I'll probably eat a lot of food later. I try not to be super strict with that because I do work hard out there, and I do like to reward myself.
Absolutely.
So I just try and stay balanced meal. Definitely.
And it sounds like pretty clean though overall too. I mean, oatmeal, or does it kind of depend? I know you mentioned pizza, so maybe not so clean. Maybe you just mentioned the clean things because you're on the podcast, right?
Yeah. I mean, probably 75-80% of the time.
Cool. No, that's cool. That's good. Yeah, because I mean, dude, when you're an athlete like you and Joshua Stevens and some of these other ultra runners that I've had on the podcast, man, it's like, dude, you're burning so many calories and going through your carb storage and all that. It's like, dude, the clean eating it's just at the end of the day, you've got to have calories, you got to have the carbs, you got to have those nutrients. And dude, eating oatmeal all day and chicken breast and rice, you can only go get so much from that that type of stuff. I mean, now if you're a bodybuilder like myself and things like that, you can get a lot more out of that because we're not doing the we're not running 100 miles and stuff like that, man. It's a completely different game, you know what I mean? But dude, like when you're a high level athlete like yourself and some of the other guests on my podcast, like dude, you just got to get the calories in. Whether
Exactly.
it's pizza or pasta or whatever, like you got to get it in. But
Something.
but it's good though too to try to keep some things clean and have, like you said, the word you use is perfect balance. You know what I mean? Have some of that junky food. And for myself too, man. Like it's important because food is such a big part of our culture. And I think if you take that mindset, which I have in the past, where it's like, dude, I'm never gonna eat out. It's like, dude, then you just, I think a lot of people, including myself, you just crave it more. And then when you do go have pizza, dude, you eat like 5 larges, and then you go overboard. So to be able to reward yourself, that's something I like to do. Is like, dude, if I bust my butt all week in my training, it's like Friday night or Saturday night, dude, like I'm gonna go out to eat, and I'm gonna go to IHOP, and I'm gonna slam down 18 pancakes, man, and a big steak omelet, and it's kind of my reward because I know tomorrow I'm gonna wake up, dude, and I'm gonna be back on, and we're gonna do it all over again.
Yep.
So some people might argue with the fact of like using food as a reward, but if you know yourself and if you're a high performing athlete and you're focused and disciplined, all that, like I think food can be a great motivator, and it's okay to reward yourself. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So that's cool, man. That's cool. Now, recovery for an athlete like yourself has to be a big thing. And again, talking to some of the ultra runners and professional athletes I've had on the podcast, recovery is, right up there with the nutrition and training, if not above those two things. So what does your recovery look like? And then what are some recovery protocols that you follow on a consistent basis to help you be the best athlete, Joshua?
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that I used to ignore and just put my head down and run, which didn't turn out well. But the major thing that has completely changed my running completely is doing stability and mobility work during and after races. And also getting chiropractic work. A lot of people don't think about their back when they run, but I mean that's pretty much all running is using your back. And I go to a place called Chiro Lab. Ellen there at the Chiro Lab has just completely changed my running, and it's crazy how much of a difference my running has made from when I started seeing her a year ago up until now. So I get that done once every couple weeks, and I mean, it's cool because she just doesn't do chiropractic work. She does soft tissue work too, and body work. So I get that done every other week. And then when race time comes, about 3 weeks out, I'll start taking ice baths after all my long runs, and that definitely helps. And then every once in a while, I'll go to the gym and get in the after I run on the treadmill at the gym, I always go into the sauna and elevate my feet. Yeah, I mean, because I read a study that runners who did that ran 15% longer the next day than runners who didn't do that.
Right.
So I'm very scientific with things. I like finding research. So yeah, definitely the Chiro Lab, getting soft tissue work, and getting in the sauna and the ice baths when I need to.
Cool. Very cool. Now I want to go back to your training just really quickly because the thought just popped up in my mind. For the training, not the running, but actually strength training and lifting weights. I know you've mentioned a couple of times bodybuilding and stuff, and I see a lot of times runners, that's all they do is run.
Yeah.
And for me, and having a bachelor's degree in exercise science and being in personal training and just in the fitness community, not just bodybuilding, but running and OCR and all kinds of different athletic adventures and stuff like that, I see a lot of people where they just focus on lifting weights. They just focus on running. They just focus on obstacle course racing. There's no real strength training. Is strength training a part of your overall training plan on a regular basis or not?
Oh, totally.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say running is main, but working with Ellen, and she also runs this place called Height Performance in Boulder. And that I do mobility and stability work twice a week, and that definitely helps. Focusing on ankle strength, focusing on quad strength and hamstring strength, and definitely glute strength because a lot of runners don't think about your glutes. But so that definitely has boosted my running too. I'm along with all that, and I would definitely say that running is what you need to do, but stability and mobility work, especially for trail running, when you're going to get beat up, when you might fall and twist an ankle, when you might fall and get hurt, if you do that type of work, you're going to be a lot more durable, and you're going to be able to run a lot longer, and you're going to be able to run faster because you'll have the power to, power up mountains and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. All right, so we've been going over an hour here, Joshua, and I want to start kind of moving into the wrap-up. I have a few more questions, and then we'll shut things down for this episode. But I want to ask you about authenticity and being real. What's the importance or the value for you in your own life in being authentic and being real and just kind of being an open book and knowing who you are and just living that life out?
Because it's just like doing drugs. If you're doing something for somebody else or acting a certain way, you aren't gonna be able to dig deep and figure out what makes you you. So that's one thing I definitely stand for is integrity. I don't care what people think about me. I don't care whether they think what I do is stupid. I don't care if they judge me. All I care about is that when I go to bed every single day, did I stay who Josh Miller is? And if you aren't true to yourself and you aren't authentic, then you're never going to find out who you are because you're always trying to be somebody else for other people. So I would say if you're really trying to figure out who you are and really trying to understand who you are as a human, if you just trust your own gut and trust who you know that you are and what you stand for and don't care about anybody else, then you'll find out, the deeper side of, who you are as a human.
Right, cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So, mountain addict is a couple words that you describe yourself through your Instagram. So, what is that all about? I mean, obviously we know what mountains are, but why are you a mountain addict? Is that when you're in the mountains and running and exploring up there, is that kind of where you really find your true self and kind of just are able to completely be free?
I mean, that's completely what it is. I mean, I guess I went from being an addict to then addicted to the mountains, and I'm not addicted to the mountains, but it is my new drug. It is something that I was searching to find myself in something else, but I figured out that through the mountains I have found out who I am. I'm definitely going out there to find that higher self of who I am.
Cool.
Yeah.
And this probably ties in with the mountains, but what does being outdoors and in nature mean to you, Joshua? Because even when you were sharing, from your childhood, you were always outside and you were always, seemed like there's always been some sort of a connection to the outdoors for you that kind of really gives you a positive vibe and gives you energy. And so what is it about maybe that you can kind of pinpoint, for you as an individual, as a man, what is it about the outdoors and being outside that just kind of gets you up and gets you going?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a quote. I'm not sure if John Muir said it or somebody, but I go out to go inward. And that's kind of what I do to find out who I am as a man. Who is Josh Miller? Is that when you're out in nature, nature provides you with seclusion. It provides you with a way to not have your cell phone or people around you. And when you don't have any of those distractions, you're forced to get in your own head. And of course, that can be really intimidating at first. But I think nature allows you to kind of get out all these modern, distractions and really figure out who you are as a person. And the quicker you do that, the more happy you're going to be. So,
awesome. What's your favorite place to run or just spend time in the state of Colorado?
Favorite place to run, definitely the Crestone Range down near the Great Sand Dunes, sort of. Just the mountains down there look like the Alps. Colorado has big mountains, but they don't have really jagged, very exposed mountains. And the Crestones remind me like I'm in the Alps, so definitely the Crestone Range.
Cool.
Yeah.
So if somebody is going to come visit Colorado and they're an avid endurance athlete or runner, is there one race here in the state of Colorado? Let's just stick to kind of what your jam is, and that's ultra running. Is there one ultra race if somebody's going to come to Colorado, visit, and they want to get into an ultra race out here that you would suggest that they definitely have to run in that race?
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say Dirty 30, and that's in June. And that's near Golden Gate State Park, and that's like the Colorado ultra race. Like everybody does it. It's super fun. Like if you're a Coloradoan or if you want to really experience what Colorado runners are, run the Dirty 30 and you'll see just about every single runner out there.
Cool. And let's just, I think, probably about 2 more questions here. If you'd like to share with the listeners, Joshua and myself, what are kind of some of your 2019 goals for yourself in regards to running?
Yeah, I have, man, what's the name of the race? I mean, I can't think of the name of the race. I have Spitfire 50K, the end of April. I have Scout Mountain, which is a 50 miler at the end of June. And then I am running a race called the UTE 100 in Moab, and that's in August. So I'm kind of progressing 50K, 50 mile, all leading up to that 100 mile. Also, I like doing big days out, which means in the trail world, like going off trail for like 14 hours, up in the mountains, getting lost. So I'm definitely going to do a lot of that this summer too.
Awesome. Now, do you have, because I know I had Stephanie Wirtz on the podcast on Thursday, and she has the record for the Lead Woman series, which is like, biking and running and all that. But the Leadville 100, which I know Joshua Stevens got an invite to that this year. Mm-hmm. Then he also got the invite to the Badwater 135, which, from my understanding, those are 2 of the most prestigious ultra races in the entire world. There's been literally books written about it. I mean, we were talking about David Goggins earlier. I know he's run the Badwater 135 several times. Are those a couple races, or are there a couple other races that you are really trying to build your running resume so that you can hopefully one day run in those type of races?
Yeah. I mean, actually, it stings because Leadville actually has this thing called a team system where you have a group of 4 people, and if one person names get called, then you all get into the lottery. Okay. And actually, I was going to be on a team, but I decided not to do it, and they all got in. So I could have gotten to the Leadville. But honestly, like, the only race that I have that I want to do is Hard Rock,
cool.
which is in the San Juans, and it's just a crazy 40,000 foot climb race. But I mean, in terms of all the other ones, I've paced people at like Western States, at Leadville, at all these places. So I've experienced them, but right now just Hard Rock 100.
Cool. Yeah. And the Hard Rock 100, is that locally here in Colorado?
Yeah, it's down in the San Juans near near Telluride and Silverton and stuff.
Okay,
very
cool. Very cool. All right, Joshua. So the last question that I have for you is, when you take your last breath, what do you want people to remember you for? What do you want your legacy to be here on this earth?
Yeah, that I stayed true to myself, and that I knew who I was, and that I wasn't willing to, sacrifice a part of me for somebody else, which, I don't do currently, but I just want to keep that path up until the day that I die, and be able to know that I lived my true self throughout my life.
Cool, man. 100%. Living life 100%.
Yeah.
I love it. So, Joshua, I just want to thank you very much for you driving down to Colorado Springs from Boulder this morning to spend time with me and to share your story. A very interesting and powerful and positive story. So thank you very much. And at this time, if you have any shout outs, if you have any sponsors, if there's anybody that you kind of want to mention, the platform, the time is yours right now to do that if you would like. Yeah. So I've mentioned a couple of them. Definitely Brandon Yonk. He's on Instagram as Brandon Yonk Run Coach. Definitely Ellen too at the Cairo Lab. It's in Boulder. Her Instagram handle is Cairo Lab. Those 2 have been, very important to my success as a runner. And then also just all my running friends in Boulder that are always there to run with me, always there to run with me in the rain and the snow. So yeah, those are definitely my favorites. Awesome. And again, I just want to thank you, Joshua, for your time today, and for driving down from Boulder, man, and definitely enjoyed our conversation. So thank you very much.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
For sure. Listeners, I want to thank you once again for tuning in to the 127 Fit podcast. If you guys want to contact me or reach out to me, I would welcome any feedback from this podcast or past podcasts in the future. Anything that you think I could do better or to make the podcast better, please just reach out to me and let me know, or anything in between. Please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. It's at 127fitness. Facebook at Quentin Vars, and then also I have at 127 Fitness on Facebook. That's the Facebook page. My website is 127fitness.com. That's just simply some of my writings. It's just blogs. If you guys could do me a huge favor, if you are enjoying the podcast, enjoying the positive guests that I'm having on the podcast, if you could please like, subscribe, share, and then most importantly, leave a review, especially with iTunes and on the Apple podcast. If you could do that, that would just really help out the podcast and get more people to find the podcast when they search. So that would be a great help. If you think you would be an awesome guest, or if you have a person or two in mind that you think might really be great guests to share their story on the 127 Fit podcast, you can email me, and that email is 127fit@gmail.com. And again, listeners, I greatly appreciate your time, you taking time out of your busy schedule to hang out with myself and my guests, because I know our lives are all crazy and busy, but for you to take an hour and a half, whatever it is, out of your schedule to tune in, it's I don't take that lightly. So thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And per usual, I will leave you with Proverbs 24:10, which states, "If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small." This time, until next time, I'll catch you guys later.